Morning. 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 Welcome, everyone. Hopefully, everyone had uneventful travels here to see me. Welcome to Las Vegas, and welcome to the Understanding Shop Liability in this new era presentation. Okay, some of the trends in the industry. I'm going to go a couple things real quick, kind of set the table here. Then Mr. Tracy's going to come up, do, like I said, a 20-minute presentation that he has, and then we're going to go to the panel with questions. So, obviously, there's been this huge acceleration of technology. Technical tsunami, as some of our friends at ICAR apparently have trademarked the name. Is that right? Yeah. So I can't use it anymore. I used to use technical tsunami all the time, and now it's today. Do I pay a quarter or what? A dime or anyway? So I can't use it anymore. Anyway, so this acceleration of technology is hitting us at every angle, not only structural and electronics, but also refinish. But every aspect of collision repair is seeing this acceleration of technology. And there's no end in sight, obviously. We're really leaping into semi-autonomous vehicles. And of course, we all know the manufacturers are working towards full autonomy. So what's that have to do with the collision repair space? A lot. You know, I don't have to tell you folks. We're up against the wall on things. We have to make sure that you're protecting your interest and your company and all the investment that you've made in your body shop. By the way, show of hands, how many body shops do we have in the room? Okay, great. All right, good to see you guys. Thanks, welcome. So we also have these requirements on repairs that are becoming more and more prevalent, right? And it's not so much requirements on paperwork or administrative. Now we got requirements on the physical repair of the vehicle. And validation of that, I think, is shortly behind that. I know that Aaron and his team work on validating that shops have the tools, equipment, and training to properly repair vehicles for various manufacturers. And we're going to, obviously, that validation piece will continue to become more and more a part of the everyday world that you guys live in. As I mentioned earlier, consumption of OEM repair procedures and the ease at which shops have that. That is going to become a big issue, and how quickly can you get that information, and at what point do you access it? Obviously, documentation thereof, etc., as what procedures were pulled at what date, what time, etc. So, shop liability increasing. Obviously, we have now the advent of the post-repair inspection industry that is popping up all over this country, right? And doing post-repair inspections, diminished value inspections, and others in support of consumers. So, oh, there we go. There they are. And of course, we have consumers are getting smarter each day. I know that consumers are very smart, and they kind of sometimes will check. Anybody have a consumer come up and tell you how their car should be fixed? Never. Anyway, no, really. Okay, it was only me. I'm the only guy. Okay. I've had plenty of people come to me and say, well, shouldn't you be doing this? And shouldn't you be doing that? Anyway, this is a slide that was shared with me by Mitchell, which I think is really interesting. And many of you may have seen this. I really can't read it from here. But the average iPhone has about, 30,000 lines of codes. The space shuttle that orbits around our country, around the world, around the universe, has just 400,000 lines of code, computer lines of code, right? And the Hadron Collider has some 50 million. Anyway, a modern high-end vehicle has 100 million lines of code. 100 million lines of code. Now, I heard that an Escalade has about 300 million lines of code. We don't have anybody from GM, maybe Scott could opine on that and how many lines of code, but it's just going north. It's continuing to go north. So imagine that. You're fixing vehicles that are, have 3 times the technology of an F-35 fighter jet, etc. So obviously important there. Information and getting information is critical, that you have the resource to get information. I don't know how many folks in here read about this Tesla, where the owner was suing, and out of, I think it was South Jordan, Utah, was suing the body shop, suing Tesla, suing everybody and their mother. Rear-ended a fire truck at 60 miles an hour, never touched her brakes, and it's everyone else's fault. It's everyone else's fault but hers. She broke her leg, and I thought it was a really interesting statement that was in the article in Repair Driven News, and I'll just read it real quickly. It said, deviate from OEM repair procedures at your own peril. After all, your inevitable OEM co-defendant has an incentive to clear its own name by checking whether your shop's failure to follow repair procedures compromised vehicle systems. So there you go. So obviously it's very critical that shop, I don't know if they're going to be released. So precise documentation of diagnostics and what action is going to be taken to repair the vehicle is critical. I don't know if you guys saw this. Boy, this was timely. These are all events happening today. This came out just Friday or Thursday. Did anyone see this, AAA's position? What a wonderful document. You can put as page 2 on this. I'll pull it up. This one here. What a wonderful one-pager to hand to my customers in the waiting area, or when they come in, and that you can go over and vis-a-vis AAA, right, a trusted source to consumers, of what ADAS is and why I have to do this, etc. Right? This was another one that just came out. This was, I believe, Friday the 26th, where the Copyright Office came out with a exempting repairs from software anti-circumvention. I can't even say that word. Circumvention. Anti-circumvention. Anyway, so the ability to access vehicle systems is a key need for collision repairs. This is a big win for the repair community, by the way, and this just came out. So I'll introduce the panelists alphabetically. I will briefly go over their credentials and who they are. I wouldn't have enough time here today if we actually went through everything and all the credentials that these gentlemen possess. So with that said, I want to welcome the panelists. Our first panelist that I'll welcome is Aaron Clark. And many of you know Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark, would you raise your hand, please? Thank you, Aaron. Aaron's Vice President of Technical Compliance at Assured Performance. Many of you in this room probably know Aaron through Assured Performance. A wonderful man. I've known him many years. He's got over 30 years experience in the industry. Had a family business in the Indianapolis market, right, Aaron? Correct. And past chairman of SCRS, ICAR Advisory Council. He's an Isaacs member. A founder and chairman of the Indiana Auto Body Association, and of course he's got the alphabet soup on the acronyms of everything he participates in. So that's Aaron Clark. Please help me welcome Aaron Clark. Our next panelist is Scott Caboose. He's the assistant manager of collision marketing for American Honda. He's got over 20-year experience as a structural repair technician. I was talking to Scott beforehand. I told him I had no idea that he had that much hands-on experience, and isn't that really good and encouraging that they have people in senior management positions within these vehicle manufacturers that actually know how to fix a car. Okay, so Scott has a long experience, worked with some MSOs and dealership shops. He also taught in a vocational school in post-secondary as well as high school. Another thing I found interesting. An ICAR instructing with welding administration welding administrator for 7 years. He holds ICAR Platinum Pro level in 6 categories. ASE Master Certified, and I thought this was interesting that he put it. Was passionate about making shops understand how to follow and apply OEM repair procedures. Obviously, the consumption of OEM repair procedures by technicians in this industry has to increase tremendously, and we believe that that's going to be obviously a big job and on your plate, obviously, that a lot of shops are having to do. It's one thing to print them, it's one thing to stick it in the RO jacket. Are they being read? Are they being read before a wrench is turned on that car, etc. So, please help me welcome Scott Caboose. Nick Notte, Nick's Senior Vice President at ICAR, Sterling Auto Body President, Allstate Director of Claims, TechCore Vice President, worked for Mitchell, and served in the NABC, ICAR, CREF boards. Nick and I have worked together for a number of years on the Recycled Rides program, co-chaired that as well together. I've known Nick a long time. He leads the ICAR team in developing and implementing strategic initiatives. So an important position within the organization. So please help me welcome Nick Notte. Chuck Olsen is the Executive Director of Operations at AirPro Diagnostics. He has 39 years plus. I like how we stopped at 39. Some of us would keep going, right? So, my 50th anniversary of my 20th birthday or something, right? Anyway, 39 years experience in every area of automotive electronics and computerized systems with vehicle manufacturers and independents. Co-inventor of remote vehicle programming systems, ASE Master Certified Technician, and has a lot of, works a lot with NATEF and the Tool and Equipment ETI, Tool and Equipment Institute, and as well as he's an adjunct instructor at the Florida State Community in Jacksonville. And please help me welcome Chuck Olsen. Jack Rozint is the SVP of Sales at Auto Physical Damage Solutions at Mitchell. Jack is very active in the industry. He's got over 25 years experience, worked with a number of OEs as well as Bosch, and Senior Vice President of Marketing at CCC. He founded a company called RepairCar.com and a consulting firm. He's the founder and board member of SECA. Many of you know what SECA is? Okay, sure. Of course Barry does. Well, SECA is the electronics arm of our industry, if you will. It broke away from CIC, the Collision Industry Conference, and they really work on making sure that estimating parallels, if you will, so one machine can talk to another and stuff like that. It's a great service to the industry that Jack provided. And he's also chairman of the Emerging Technologies Committee with the Collision Industry Conference. So with that, please help me welcome Jack Rozint. And last but not least, this man probably doesn't need any introduction here. I mean, everyone knows about Mr. Todd Tracy. If you say Honda Fit, pretty much everyone knows where I'm going with that. But Mr. Tracy is the Tracy Law Firm. He has over 30 years, has handled over 3,000 cases against every major vehicle manufacturer, component part suppliers, and child seat manufacturers. He's a frequent lecturer around the country on how to identify, investigate, and try crash worthiness cases. He's written over 170 articles on restraint systems. Mr. Tracy routinely conducts crash testing in areas where the vehicle industry fails to conduct dynamic testing, so he can share the test data with others. I know he's going to share some of that with you today, folks. So with that, please help me welcome Mr. Todd Tracy. We've got some input, some questions, so I'll go through some of them. We have a lot, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. How's that sound, okay? All right. So, and this one isn't necessarily been asked of any one individual or anything, but, you know, I will pivot to Nick because I thought it was interesting. In Todd's presentation, he talked about, you know, civil liability versus criminal liability. And that is coming. And I know that in New England somewhere, a technician, I think it was on the mechanical side, who did an improper brake repair or something like that. Remember that, Steve? I think they actually went after the technician, and he went to jail. And so it's obviously pretty scary in that regard. Well, with that said, do the education bodies inform students of their potential liability? Nick?
You know, Mike, it's a good question. I don't think we do a good job of that. I'm not exactly sure that it's our responsibility to do that. It's our responsibility to train those folks so that they know how to facilitate a complete, safe, quality repair. And I think intrinsically, if you do that, you protect it.
Thanks, Nick.
Can I disagree?
Sure.
Is that okay? Yeah, sorry.
Sure.
I think it's incumbent upon every organization here to tell people that if you don't do it right, that there are consequences civilly, there are consequences criminally, and who better to tell the consequences to than the industry leader than ICAR. I mean, I think you ought to bring some criminal defense lawyers in here and let them discuss it. Bring some prosecutors in here and discuss it. I think you guys need to know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Just my thoughts.
Which brings up any counter, Nick? Or?
No, you're entitled to your position.
Sure. You know,
I'm not going to send a bomb to him, though.
I know that.
So I'll get you.
He's ready to hear first.
I know that, speaking about a panel of attorneys or something like that, I know that some shops, you might be aware of this, Todd, but some body shops are using release forms and they're asking the customer, if you don't want us to do the scan, you need to sign this release form releasing us of any liability from this repair. And obviously, I think we need to set the record straight there. That's not going to cut it, would it?
Oh, it's worthless as the toilet paper you used this morning. I mean, because I want you to think about this. It may be used against, it may be used against a parent, the person who signed it, okay? But what about if you didn't sign it? It's not going to be good for the, what about if your vehicle's driving down the road, you lose the brakes and you hit somebody else, okay? And those people didn't sign off. So you've got third-party concerns. What about if it's a child? You cannot waive a child's rights with a release. So I mean, in theory, will it keep some people away? Sure. But if they have any modicum of sense at all, they'll go to a lawyer and find out, and they'll say that this is worthless.
Right. Any comments from the panel? Aaron?
I don't have an opinion on that, honestly. You know, I have certainly been informed by legal counsel that you cannot sign anybody else's rights away, and I think that Todd said it right. Ultimately, if you do the right thing, I think you're good. Just do the right thing. You don't have to worry about it. And the right thing is following, you know, doing what you know the prescription is. Follow the prescription. You'll be safe.
Any other comments on that?
You know, one of the things we talked a little bit about post-repair inspections and how far the liability extends. Obviously, it extends out to the technician. How about vehicle owners? Could this extend indefinitely to 10 years down the road? And Mr. Tracy?
I would, with respect to, you have to have privity in most states. Privity means that you have a relationship with the entity, and if you, let's say that you're three cells removed from a repair, and you were the owner for 3 cells ago, you're absolutely not going to be held accountable. If you were the immediate owner and then sell it, and you knew about stuff that was wrong with the vehicle and sold it anyway without disclosing it, I will tell you, there's going to be a time, and there will be a place, that will be in more of the liberal venues in this country, but I would venture to say that you potentially have some exposure.
Any comments on that?
I think.
Scott?
Thank you. So one thing I would consider on that is, okay, as the second vehicle owner, you've sold it, whatever, maybe you don't have as much liability, but wouldn't the shop still have the same liability no matter who owns it? If they did a poor repair?
Shop buys it all. No matter who owns it, no matter how far removed. Now, here comes the issue. Let's say you repair it and then the vehicle's been involved in another accident, but it was minor. And then they have modified what you did. You better have documentation on what you did. Always coming back to document what you do. Because that way they can't come there and just have a photograph and then you have nothing. That's why it's so critically important that your files, instead of having the repair order, I think somebody was talking about that earlier today, instead of having 1 or 2 pieces of paper in there now, you better have a library of documents backing you up.
Any comments? A recent survey, I think it was Body Shop Business, showed that 3% of repair facilities surveyed indicated they had a qualified diagnostician on staff. With 100+ million lines of code, I don't know that that's going to get any easier. And how can shops possibly keep up? Anyone? Nick?
Yeah, it's a good point. And as we move into, as we at ICAR move into the next phase of our professional development program, I think some of you guys may have heard me talk at CIC maybe last time. But we came up with an automotive collision repair industry knowledge and skills protocol document. This is a listing of all of the knowledge and skills by role in a collision repair facility that you need to know to do a safe, complete quality repair. Next year, as we roll out that new professional development program, one of the things we added was a role for electrical diagnostic. So in here, if you're a gold class shop, you have a overall shop responsibility to be trained in electrical diagnostics. So that's an added role that the shop will be responsible for if you want to be gold class.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that as well with the
with the skills of the technicians that are in the shop. And even with that, I think it's fantastic that that role's coming forward with more electrical training, electronics training, entering into the body shop environment. But even with that, a network of access to different resources for different vehicles, because not all OEMs are going to be the same. The specialty that is going to be involved with different manufacturers is going to have to be shared across multiple entities in order for everybody to get the information that they need on each individual repair procedure that has to be done.
Let me just add that in addition to that protocol, we actually have a list of all the training that's available for all those roles, for all the knowledge areas, including electrical, mechanical. And this is ICAR training. This is not an ICAR document. This is an industry document. If you guys want this, you can get it at i-car train2gain, gain.com/protocol. And both of these documents are there. This is a listing of all the knowledge and skills you need to know as a collision repair technician by role in all of the training that's available, ICAR training, OE training that's accepted in the ICAR, the Industry Alliance, and supplier training as well. So this is available right now for you. We'll update it as we get more training. I would say that you could help us out asking those OEs that you guys are close to get into the training alliance so that we have all of that training recognized in a document that the industry can use.
And just to build on what everybody's saying, we're addressing this exact issue this afternoon at CIC at the Emerging Technologies, and Daryl Emerson is heading up a work group about this new technician and what the person looks like and what they do, and certainly training is a fundamental part of it. But you know, they also have to ask the question of, do I have the right individual in my organization today to perform these tasks? Because if you look at the traditional roles of body man, painter, mechanic, you know, none of those roles may actually have the skill set and the type of thinking that's needed to be what is essentially a computer network technician. I mean, we're talking about a very complicated computer network on 4 wheels, and it requires a certain level of, you know, analytical problem solving, and the willingness and ability to do research is part of the skill set that we've talked about in some of the early meetings. So, you know, making sure you have the right person before you go spend a bunch of money on training, because if you don't, you might have somebody that just isn't cut out for this type of work. It's a whole new skill set that didn't exist in the collision repair industry 10 years ago. And you know, I grew up in Connecticut, and there was farms around there, and there's kind of the old expression about the farmer that kept trying and trying to get milk out of the pasture. You know, he had horses. You know, if you don't have a cow, you've got a problem to begin with. So you got to make sure you have the right individual with the right skills and that willingness and ability to do research to keep up with all this stuff.
And building on what Jack said, I think what Jack's almost saying is you've got to be careful on what you put on your websites. Because I will tell you, if you go make a bunch of puffery and you go make a bunch of promises on there that come, you know, that maybe this individual, maybe you did have a highly qualified, maybe you did have a double certified guy on this or that, but they've left and you haven't replaced them. You better be careful on what you put on your websites. There's always ways to leave you some room for, you know, to escape liability. I'm just telling you, be careful on what you put on your websites, you know, without qualifications and certifications and promises made.
Let me just, I don't want to go down and get another tangent, but I'll just tell you guys this, that part of our 5-year strategy at ICAR is to help the industry with the technician shortage. You know, one of the things we're looking at is this electrical and mechanical role and a way to attract some of the, you know, the kids. I'm talking about middle-aged or middle school kids into the collision industry. And we've reached out to some organizations that feel the same way we do. We'll be working on this stuff. So I think that's a home run for the industry. I think it's a home run for body shops being able to attract these kids that are pretty technical. You know, I have a problem with my phone. I go to my kids, they fix my phone. But, you know, I get a new car. I have my son come over and tell me how it works. So I think that's good for us. And I grew up in the same Connecticut town.
So we're at 3% today. So what are the shops doing in the meantime? 5 years down the road, ICAR is going to have a program, or so where are the shops today? What are they left to do besides send it to the dealer? Is there any options?
Sublet services and remote services. What AirPro Diagnostics is working on is to spread that skill set of diagnostics to the community so that they can get the proper documentation, get the help doing the research to fill those gaps where that skill set is missing today.
Nice.
I guess I'd like to add that subletting does not absolve you any liability. Make sure that if you are subletting to a sublet vendor that you understand and know their qualifications to perform those operations just the same as you. Because you can't just think that you by sublet that you're absolving yourself of liability and that the vehicle's actually getting what it in fact needs. So make sure that the training exists in any of your sublet vendors just like you would within your own organization.
Then if you're going to sublet, you need to make certain that the subletting entity has liability insurance coverage and garage policy insurance coverage, and you need to make certain that you're an additional uninsured on it.
Named additional insured. Yeah. And sufficient coverage.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you this, $1 million is not sufficient coverage anymore, folks. I mean, if you get banged up and you're in ICU for 15 days, you've exhausted $1 million in 15 days.
Scary.
Yeah. So let's talk about the OEMs. Let's pivot to the OEMs. So, Scott, what are the OEMs doing to ensure proper repairs? And we talked a lot about how important it's going to be. I guess validation is going to become more and more prevalent in the repair community. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or how are they validating scans performed, or electronic systems reset? I mean, obviously someday you'll probably know everything about every car that's repaired.
That's the dream, is someday that the telematics are going to give us the direct link and the information that we would love to have right now. Right now we don't have that. Mm-hmm. The only way we can do that is to go into our shops and pull files manually and say, show me how you scan this car. Right. And we do that for our Pro First network of shops. And not only do we ask them to show us the scans, but we want them to prove that it was done using our software.
The IHDS.
So IHDS software, which is Honda's proprietary scanning software. So if you're a Pro First shop, one way or another, you're going to use that software. And then when you get your audit, we're going to come in, we're going to pull 4 or 5 files and say, okay, on these Honda Acura vehicles, did you perform scans? Did you use our software to do them? Now, someday, technology is going to catch up, and we're going to be able to do this on a lot higher level, and we're going to get a lot more feedback. But right now, it's a very manual process, and it's really a spot check. Our Pro First program certifies that the shop has the tools, equipment, training, facilities, and they have access to repair procedures and service information. That's what we are certifying when we certify a shop. We are not certifying that you fix the car right, because we can't verify that. We would have to have 1,000 people on staff to do that, and we can't. So we're doing the best we can right now by at least certifying the shop that you can fix a car right. The next step is, did you fix the car right? So there will be a day I'm seeing in the future where there will be a lot more visibility on our end into scanning and calibration, and we'll be able to know what was done on the car, maybe even in real time.
The vehicle will actually tell you that.
The vehicle will tell us something.
The vehicle will tell Honda that it's not.
But we're not there yet today.
Aaron, any comments on that?
This has been a large concern in the industry for far too long, and I think I would have to echo everything that Scott said here. Assured Performance has recently built a solution that allows the shop to, at the end of the day, the body shop is going to be held liable. I personally went through a situation where I couldn't, had several stores in Indianapolis, Indiana. One of the leading reasons that caused me to lose interest in this industry was because I was held responsible for not performing operations in repairing a car that were required by a vehicle manufacturer. I had no knowledge of it. I had no proof that I did perform these operations, and the settlement was over $8 million. And to Todd's point, $1 million isn't going to cut it. Thankfully, I had the kind of coverage to be able to provide that settlement, because otherwise it would have went to a jury trial and they could have potentially made me responsible for $20 million, not had the coverage, and essentially been out of business. It will only take once for you guys to understand the magnitude and the scope of what we're discussing here. And until you've gone through it or know somebody that's gone through it, the reality of it isn't necessarily front and center in your face. I think that'll change as I think that there will be, everything that Todd Tracy's been part of so far is only the beginning. There is more of these kind of situations that are going to come, and my guess is you'll see bigger settlements than what happened in the Seavishon case. You know, frankly, you guys just have to make sure that you understand how to do it, and if you don't do it. Your biggest friend in the future, in my opinion, would be your ability to say no. Because if you can't, if you don't have the equipment, you don't have the capability or the knowledge, you don't have the alignment with a sublet vendor that does, essentially what you've just discovered is you're not qualified to perform the repair, and there's nothing wrong with saying I'm not qualified to perform the repair. This is where the industry's really stumbled a lot, in my opinion, because I think because some of the pressures with the insurance industry to just fix the car, and maybe some of the naivety with some of the shops to say, yeah, I can fix that. Today, it's different. And you've got to have the tools, you've got to have the equipment, you've got to have the training, and if you don't, stay away.
Amen.
So last year is ICAR's 40th anniversary, and for 39 years now, we've been training, providing education on collision repair. For the last 4 years, I've been at ICAR as an employee for 3, but the last 4 years, we've had our industry segment advisory council on the collision repair side tell us, hey, you got to do more than provide education. You got to know that the instruction and the education that you provide is being used the right way in those shops. And they boil it down to, about a year ago, they boiled it down to 3 things. They said, you have to make sure that, from an equipment standpoint, that the shop has it, that the equipment works, and that technician knows how to use it. So at NACE, our board of directors approved ICAR to be involved in making sure that shops do have that right equipment. We're working on an equipment protocol to make sure that happens. Using folks like Aaron and folks across the industry to make sure that those shops do have the right equipment, they do know how to use it, and that it works, and that it's there more than just for the day of the inspection.
So I just wanted to follow on to something Scott said about the fact that there's very little visibility into the quality of the repair. And if you think about the KPIs in our industry, and cycle time, for example, that is measured with such precision from the date of loss to the first call to the insurance company, to the time that the vehicle was assigned to a DRP, to when the DRP contacted the customer, to when the customer brought the vehicle in, to when the estimate was written, to when the parts were ordered. We have that kind of minutia level KPIs around something like cycle time, and it's important because cycle time drives a lot of things that include productivity and customer satisfaction. But where's the KPI around quality? Where's the KPI around was that vehicle fixed correctly? And the only quality metric we've ever had in the industry has been asking the customer in a post-repair survey, was the vehicle repaired correctly? And guess what? If the paint matched and there was no big gaps, they said yes. And that's the only metric we've had. So that's one of the challenges that the company I work for is facing right now. We're re-architecting our whole portfolio so that we can start to capture quality type of metrics. When were the repair procedures viewed? Were they viewed during the repair planning process, during the actual repair, and during the quality assurance cycle? By whom, by when, how long did they stay on the page? And for instance, when a sectioning procedure says you can only section this rail in one particular spot, making it easy for the technician to whip out a mobile phone and take a picture of that and have that automatically update the repair record. So at the end of the day, we have that file that Todd was talking about, where we've got a complete documentation of everything that happened, that the repair procedures were followed, and I have the evidence that they were followed. I have the technician ID, the date and time, and I even have the quality assurance. So that's something that is incumbent on us as an information provider to basically step up our game to now create metrics and KPIs around this so that you have that ability to document quality, because like I said, quality is one of the most important things that happens, and it's never really had a KPI.
So Jack, and I know that you're currently working with General Motors on their certification program. Is Mitchell going to, is GM asking for that validation?
That's exactly why GM wanted us to be the administrator of the program, because they wanted to go beyond the traditional idea of certifying that the shop has the proper equipment, training, and facilities, which they also do that, of course, and we're working with Aaron's company as part of that. But they wanted to get into being able to, without 1,000 people in the field, to be able to get some visibility into individual repairs and what's going on and where the repair procedures followed and what evidence do we have of that at the end of the day.
If I may, allow me to illustrate to you guys that what you do very well is you document you provide an insurer or any third party all the evidence of what that vehicle had as a result of the collision when it came into your shop. You're documenting by way of taking photographs of all the damage that exists in the car. And with that said, until you actually provide yourself or some other third party with all the evidence of each one of those things being repaired, you've done yourself a disservice, because you provided documentation that shows the damage, and you didn't do anything to provide any documentation that the damage was restored correctly by you. So I would caution you that everything that is a line item on an invoice or a photograph that you provided to a customer or an insurer is something that you guys should make sure that you've also got a record of compliance that shows that you have in fact repaired that and restored that back to its original condition, or that of which the manufacturer prescribed to be back to a specification. I think that Jack did a nice job of illustrating some of these challenges and the fact that technology really doesn't exist, which is the same reason that Assured Performance built the technology that we did to provide, just to give you guys a tool that allows you to document each one of those line items with as much proof of compliance as necessary. We didn't put a limitation on how many PDFs you could attach to it, how many photographs you could attach to it. You could put 20 gig of compliance, whatever is necessary for you guys to cover your act, because the tool didn't exist. How, you guys would have to build this kind of compliance file manually, store it manually, having actual plates of broken welds, photographs of you doing test welds, documentation of the welder that you use. Did you follow all these prescriptions that are necessary for you to complete that repair accurately? And I think that some of the equipment that's coming out is going to help you maintain a log. Who did it? What time did you do it? What kind of process did you go through to make sure that welder was working correctly? Did the welder provide you feedback? Did you take that feedback and apply it? But all of those things are something that you are responsible to do, and you're going to be held accountable to do them, so you better start doing them.
And I think building on what Aaron just said, and I think what he's saying is this: at the end of the day, when you get through restoring a vehicle back to a crashworthiness condition, and you look at your file, one of these days it may have an exhibit sticker on it. Is that going to be a file that's going to save you or crucify you? And if you follow what this man just said here, I guarantee you'll be okay. But if you have an exhibit sticker on a single piece of paper with just a bunch of random notes on there, it's not going to cut it.
Reasonable documentation is a great first step. And in the absence, doing nothing is certainly not any answer. If you do nothing, you're negligent, you're going to be held responsible, because in the absence of nothing, you didn't do it, right?
That's exactly right.
So make a good solid attempt at building a file to protect you. And I think, again, that's a good first step. As this industry moves on, I think that we'll probably see case evidence of where somebody either screwed up their documentation, that left a big hole in it, that we can all get better from some of these things. I know it's gonna happen. I wouldn't wanna see it happen to any of you guys. It's happened to me, I went through it and it changed my life.
So regarding documentation, thanks Aaron, thanks guys. Regarding documentation, when the initial documentation is just pulling a list of codes, maybe Chuck, you could share with us and or Chuck, how important is it to get, not just the list of codes? Talk a little bit about delving into the data streams and why that's important and for that documentation to that payor of what exactly is wrong with this vehicle when I took it into my possession.
Yeah, this is perfect. That's what you guys are saying when you overall repair the vehicle. But getting specifically into the diagnostic trouble codes. So if you have a line item on a ticket that I get a pre-scan, and that's the only thing that you have, that's really not enough. What were the results of that pre-scan? And what were the codes? And now you have a list of codes. You have I did a pre-scan. So did I clear the code? Did you do the inspections? What did you do with those codes? What did you do with that information that you just received from that vehicle? Because a pre-scan, you're just querying the vehicle and asking the vehicle, it's like, tell me what your symptoms are. Tell me what's wrong. Tell me what has happened. And then you have to follow through with those. If you just have codes and you just print a list of codes and just clear codes, you haven't done your job. You might as well not be doing pre-scanning or post-scanning, because that's really not what it's about. The pre-scan and querying the system in the diagnostic trouble codes is just a piece of the pie. So, and that's where you start. And still to this day, I hear so much of this, I'm not going to pre-scan because I'm not getting paid. It's, I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. Scan the vehicle, get the information from the vehicle, and then use the results of that scan for your diagnostic process. That's really what it is for your pre-scan, is the diagnostic process. And your post-scan process is making sure that the systems you diagnosed on the pre-scan have been taken care of, have been addressed, are documented what you did to fix them, and then did the calibrations, because the scan tool is not going to tell you that I have to do a calibration. That's where the research comes into play. You have to document your service information, what the service information said. If I did this R&R procedure, I have to perform this particular calibration. If you didn't research it, you can't count on the scan tool to tell you to do it, and if you didn't do it, it's not going to end up in that docket when it comes time for if something happens further on down the road. So that's the important part. It's more about diagnostics than just reading and clearing trouble codes.
And I think that even with non-ADAS systems, with SRS systems, with Honda sometimes, the fault code, DTC code does not come back necessarily, which would require to go in the screen. Scott?
Yeah, so anybody that doesn't understand or doesn't know, Honda changed and went from an earlier system to an ASE standard with their airbag DTCs about 2013, and they phased it in over about 4 or 5 years. So now basically all vehicles are on the new ASE standard. There are no DTCs in a Honda vehicle for airbag deployment.
Do you hear that?
So when you pull the codes, there will not be a code that said the airbag deployed. Because, and I'll tell you why, and I asked the engineer, I said, why did we do this? He said, airbag deployment is not a malfunction. It's an intended consequence of another event. He says, this is a fault code. A DTC is a fault code. There's nothing wrong with that system if it got in the accident and an airbag deployed. That's what it was supposed to do. So you need to actually go into deployment history, which is a subset of the scan, and pull a secondary report that will tell you what deployed, what sensors aren't working, what has communication, what doesn't have communication. And then you need to follow the OEM service information to determine what needs to be replaced based on that information. So, and one little simple thing, like occupant classification sensor. Disconnecting the battery and reconnecting the battery requires that you do a system check on the occupant classification sensor for the passenger seat, which requires a scan tool that you go in and actually pull the range and compare it to the known values in the service information. If it's out of range, you have to recalibrate that seat sensor. That's been on our car since 2006. No position statement, it's in the service information. If you looked at our disconnect and reconnect battery procedure, which nobody looks up because you know how to disconnect the battery, right? Everybody knows how to do that, a technician. So you don't read it. Well, if you did read it, you would see the final step of that procedure is check the occupant classification sensor. If you don't do that, that airbag may not fire properly in the next accident.
How do you check that sensor?
You go in with a scan tool and it'll give you a range.
Scan tool.
And it will tell you the range on this vehicle should be between 0.5 and 0.7. I'm just making this stuff up. But there's a range. It will tell you if it's between 0.5 and 0.7, you're clean. No need to recalibrate it. If it's outside of that range, there's a procedure where you have to set a known weight in the seat, tell the scan tool that you're doing this, and go in there and recalibrate it.
So if a car's in the paint shop and they pull the battery terminal to paint the car, go scan the car.
Exactly.
And a code reading codes is not going to get you to this information. That is a procedure that you do with a scan tool. It's not a DTC read and a DTC clear. And there are hundreds of procedures that you do with a scan tool that a diagnostic technician, somebody familiar with the programs, knows how to use these programs that apply these procedures as needed in relation to whatever repairs were done.
Jack?
So, and this now I think circles back to what we were talking about earlier. Do you want to do this in-house or do you want to outsource it? So, you know, if you have a four-wheel alignment system and a computerized measuring system in your facility, why do you have those? You made a big investment in those. Two things. One is productivity, and two is you know that it's done right, and so you can keep the cars moving through and get them done right. And all these calibrations that we're talking about, many of which don't get done today, they're just exploding. So as you're starting to look at the 2019 vehicles and the 2020s, the steering angle sensor, the seat weight sensor, those are simple ones that can be done in-house. You got to have a scan tool, you got to have the right technician with the right training. But you know, as you go on from there, there's more and more systems that are going to need to be recalibrated. And if you're not accessing the repair procedures and understanding that, and if you have to outsource every single one of those, think about the implications to your productivity and your cycle time and your profitability. I mean, right? Because when you do your framework now, you do it as a profit center. And diagnostics should be looked at as a profit center too. If you're doing it in-house with the right tech and the right equipment, you should be getting paid for it. And if you're not, that is something which I agree with needs to be worked on as an industry. But you got to look at it as this is a potential profit center, and it's also a way that I'm going to be able to be getting cars through my facility quickly and ensuring that I'm turning out a proper and safe repair. And so I don't think outsourcing necessarily, there's certainly going to be some vehicles that have to be outsourced because there's so many variations of systems, and if you need the floor mat to do the blind spot monitoring, that car's probably going to have to go to the dealership because you don't want to buy a floor mat for every car that's got a side view system. But you really need to think about, in my opinion, about doing this in-house and developing, making sure you have the tools, the training, and the capability to do a lot of this in-house for a variety of reasons.
Good evening. I want to recognize the panel. There's quite, everybody will hang around for a little while. I'd like to recognize these gentlemen for their time and effort to be here. So please help me out. I'm sure we'll continue on with questions. If one wants, afterwards we'll break up. I know some people need to go and get back to CIC, etc. Thank you all very much. Have a great evening. Enjoy the show.